Welcome to Chronicles Night. Tonight's story isn't about space or fear or survival. It's about something quieter, something many people carry but few talk about. It's about what it feels like to stand at the funeral of someone you lied to. Not once, but over and over, and never told the truth. It's about guilt that doesn't shout, it just waits. A story of final chances that never come. Of words you held in and until there was no one left to hear them. If that's a feeling you understand, or even if it's not, stay with me tonight. If you're staying with me tonight, subscribe, and tell me where you're listening from, and what time your night begins. Imagine lying to someone, not a stranger, not a person you barely know or will never see again, but someone who trusts you, completely, instinctively, without condition. Someone who looks at you with open eyes and no suspicion. Someone who hands you their faith like a small, delicate object, believing you'll hold it carefully because of course you would. Because you always have. Because that's who you are, aren't you? At first, the lie is small. So small, in fact, that it barely feels like lying. It feels like mercy, a shield. You think you're protecting them from something. Maybe it's something about the past, something you did, something they misunderstood, something that would only cause pain. So you smooth the edges. You bend the truth. You say gently, "It didn't happen like that," or "It wasn't what you think." You speak with care, you speak with love, and in your own mind that justifies it. And they believe you. Of course they do. You start to notice things differently after they're gone. Not just the obvious absences, their voice, their laughter, their presence in the places they always used to be, but the way the world seems quieter in a way that isn't comforting. Like it knows, like it's holding its breath around you. People speak to you in soft tones now, assuming your sorrow is the ordinary kind. They bring you flowers, baked goods, condolences. They place their hands gently on your shoulder and say things like, "They knew how much you cared," or "They were lucky to have you." You nod, because that's what you're supposed to do. But every word lands like a stone in your stomach. Because you know the truth. And they don't. What they'll never understand is that your grief isn't clean. It's not shaped like a wound that needs time. It's shaped like a door you refused to open while you still had the key. You had 1,000 chances. There were nights they sat across from you with tired eyes, with questions in their voice, with just enough hope left to believe you might finally speak. But you didn't. And now that chance is sealed behind an ending neither of you can rewrite. So instead, you walk through memories like ruins. Not because they're broken, but because you are. You remember the night in late summer when they told you about a dream they had, something strange and symbolic, something that left them rattled and searching for meaning. You remember the way they looked at you, hoping you'd offer some explanation, some deeper truth. And all you did was nod. You remember birthdays, long walks, passing jokes. And you remember how often your smile felt like a mask, how often your silence felt like betrayal. At first, the lie was about them, but over time it became about you, about who you were willing to be, about how long you were willing to let someone love a version of you that wasn't entirely real. You convinced yourself that if you kept showing up, if you kept doing the right things, then maybe it would be okay. That maybe the truth could live in the background, quietly, like dust behind the curtains, unnoticed, harmless. But truth doesn't work like that. It waits. And when the chance to speak is gone, it begins to ache. Not like a cut, not sharp and clean, but like a dull ache in the bones. It shows up in the middle of your day, when you hear a song they used to love. It arrives when you find an old letter they wrote, their handwriting looping across the page like something still alive. It haunts you, not because it accuses you, but because it doesn't, because it never will. And that mercy hurts more than any judgment ever could. Sometimes you think about writing them a letter. You imagine what you would say, how you would explain yourself. Not to escape guilt, but just to finally speak the words you never could. You'd tell them that it wasn't about not trusting them, that it wasn't about shame or cowardice or even protection. It was about fear, the kind that roots itself in the deepest parts of you, the kind you mistake for silence. You'd tell them you always meant to come clean, that you rehearsed it 1,000 times, that you believed foolishly that you had more time. And maybe in that letter, you'd apologize, not just for the lie, but for every moment after it, every dinner shared in silence, every laugh that didn't quite reach your eyes, every conversation that passed like a missed train, just a little too late, a little too far away. You'd write until the page blurred beneath your hands, and still, it wouldn't be enough. Because you're not writing to someone who can forgive you. You're writing to the echo of what you lost. And there's no comfort in that. Not really. Because to them, you are solid. You are home. You are safety. They don't cross-examine you. They don't read between your words. They just take them in and wrap themselves in them. And you, watching this, feel both relieved and something else. Something heavier. The truth doesn't disappear when you deny it. It just sits quietly in the corner of the room, waiting, watching, growing. Time passes. They smile at you, tell you things they've never told anyone else. They share memories, or plans, or fears. And each time they do, your silence stretches a little thinner. It starts to hum beneath your skin, especially at night, especially in the quiet. You begin to realize that they are living in a version of reality that you shaped. They are trusting something you built with omission and soft deceit. And yet, still, they are kind, they are warm, they are grateful. And somehow, that makes it worse. You tell yourself you'll fix it. That next week you'll say something. Or next time they ask, you rehearse how it will sound. You plan the words. You imagine the look in their eyes when you finally speak the truth. Shock? Maybe? Hurt? But then, understanding. You hope for that. You cling to that possibility like a lifeline. But the moment never feels right. And every time you stay silent, the cost of telling the truth rises a little more. Like interest on a debt you don't have the courage to pay off. Then, one day, they're gone. Maybe it was sudden. Maybe it was slow, something you watched from a distance, helpless and quiet, the way you've been for so long. Maybe you stood in a hospital room, or on the other end of a phone call, or maybe it was a text from someone else telling you it happened in the night, peacefully. You think of how easily that word is used, peacefully, as if peace and truth are the same thing. But now, there is no one left to tell. The window is closed. The story is frozen. And your lie, your protection, your silence, your mercy will never be challenged, never be forgiven, never be healed. Because the one person who could have met you with understanding, who could have changed the end of this story, is beyond your reach. You go to the funeral. You sit in the back or stand by a wall, not quite sure where you belong. You hear others speak of them, the kindness, the generosity, the way they loved fiercely and forgave easily. You nod. You even smile. But inside you feel like a thief, like someone who took something without asking and can never give it back. The weight of the lie doesn't fade, it deepens. It becomes a part of your body. You carry it not like a secret, but like a scar no one can see. And in quiet moments, in stillness, you feel it pressing against your ribs, against your throat. Not because you regret what you did, but because you waited too long to make it right. And now you don't get to. That's the thing about truth. It doesn't disappear just because you bury it. It lingers. It shapes you. And when there's no one left to hear it, it becomes a kind of ghost. Not loud, not vengeful, just ever present, sitting beside you when you remember them, echoing in your mind when others say their name. And most of all, whispering to you in those final minutes before sleep, asking again and again, why didn't you tell me? Why did you wait? And now, the only voice left to answer is yours. You don't remember exactly when the guilt stopped being something you could compartmentalize. It used to be a background noise, low, constant, easy to ignore when the world was loud. But now, the world isn't loud anymore. Now it's quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Not the kind of quiet people describe as comforting. This is the quiet that presses in. The kind that wraps around you like a wet sheet in winter. The kind that listens to your thoughts and repeats them back to you in your own voice, but lower, slower, sharper. There are entire hours where you don't move. You sit in the same chair you've always sat in, staring at the corner of the room where the paint is chipped just slightly. You think about fixing it sometimes. You don't. You tell yourself you're tired, that you've had a long week. But the truth is, it's not just a corner of chipped paint. It's a reflection of everything. The slow rot of things unattended. Things left to wear away because no one could face what was underneath. The lie started with a decision. That's what you keep going back to. A single moment. Insignificant at the time. When you told yourself that silence was safer. You thought you were making a sacrifice. That by carrying the burden yourself, you were sparing them pain. And maybe that was true. For a while. Maybe they did sleep better. Maybe they did laugh louder. But they built their peace on a foundation that you knew was false. And no matter how steady they looked standing on it, you were the one watching the cracks form beneath their feet. Now they're gone. You can't go back. There's no moment to return to, no conversation to replay with a better answer. You can't take their hands and say the words. Can't see their face shift when the truth lands. You can only imagine it. And that's the cruelest part. Your imagination is relentless. It plays every possible version. One where they scream. One where they walk away. One where they quietly nod and say, I know. But you'll never know which would have been real. Because you waited too long. You said nothing for too many years. And now the only voice left is yours. And it has nowhere to go. People tell you it's okay to grieve. They mean well. But they're grieving someone different than you are. They're grieving the version of her they knew. The laughter, the compassion, the strength. You're grieving a version only you knew. The one you lied to. The one who asked you gently, over and over again, are you sure? The one who paused in doorways, hoping you'd call out and say, wait, there's more I need to tell you. The one who trusted silence because it came from you. You try to distract yourself. You clean. You take long walks without a destination. You pick up old books, hoping that someone else's words will drown out your own. But it doesn't work. Because grief with guilt is not a clean wound. It doesn't sting, then scab, then heal. It pulses. It leaks. It infects everything. You taste it in your coffee. Hear it in the hum of the refrigerator at 3 a.m. You feel it in your hands when you reach for your phone and realize there's no one to call. And still, every night, you play the same scenes in your mind. The last day you saw her, the way her coat hung slightly too loose, the way she smiled, tired but still bright. You told her she looked great. She said you always knew what to say. And in that moment, the truth surged in your throat like water against a dam. But you swallowed it. Again. You smiled back. You let the lie stand. And now that's the moment you'll carry forever. Not her smile. Not her laugh. Not her kindness. But the silence that wrapped around you both like a second skin. The house is quieter now. People have stopped dropping by. The texts have slowed. Grief, for others, has a timeline. For you, it has no end. Because yours isn't just sadness. It's consequence. Every object in the room feels like a reminder. The scarf she left behind on your couch. The mug she always used. Even the old blanket still folded neatly on the edge of the armchair. The one you were supposed to return but never did. You hold it sometimes not for comfort, but for penance. As if holding something she touched might pull the truth from your chest and send it to wherever she is now. But it won't. And you know that. And still, you do it. Because the mind, when burdened by unfinished confessions, becomes its own punishment. Every quiet moment becomes a courtroom. Every memory, a witness. And there is no jury, no sentence, no absolution. Just the endless repetition of what you didn't say. What you should have said. What she will never hear. Would she have forgiven you? That's the question that haunts you most. Not because you expect she would, but because you know she might have. And the fact that you robbed her, and yourself, of that moment is what twists in your stomach late at night, when everything else is still. You don't want to be forgiven. You want the chance to have asked for it, but that door is closed, and you are left on this side, holding the weight of words unsaid. You begin to dread the mornings, not because of what they bring, but because of what they don't. There's no reset, no new day feeling. You open your eyes and the ache is right there waiting for you, patient and intact, as if it had been sitting by your bedside all night, watching. It doesn't scream, it doesn't rush, it just waits for you to remember. And you do, every single time. You used to love the sound of birds before sunrise. Now it feels like they mock you with their consistency, their innocent repetition. They sing like nothing's wrong, like time hasn't turned your silence into something permanent. You sit on the edge of your bed, fingers tangled, elbows resting on your knees, trying to make sense of how life moves on for everyone else, how their clocks still tick forward when yours feels stuck on the moment she left without ever knowing who you really were. You think of the last gift she gave you. It wasn't extravagant. A book, probably, or something handmade. She was like that, personal, deliberate, thoughtful in ways you didn't deserve. You told her you loved it, and you did. But now that object carries a weight it never asked for. You haven't moved it in weeks. It sits where she placed it, like an altar. You try to read it sometimes, but your eyes can't make it past the inscription. Just her handwriting. Just her voice in your mind. Writing words to someone she thought she knew. Someone who wasn't lying. Someone who hadn't buried a part of the truth in silence so deep that not even time could exhume it. Sometimes. When it gets bad, truly bad, you go for long walks with no phone, no music, no destination. You walk until your feet blister, until your knees ache, until exhaustion numbs everything else. You pass people and wonder if they can see it on your face. The guilt, the mourning, the hollow. Most just nod, polite and uninterested, but a few give you a look that lingers a second too long and you wonder. Do they know? Could they know? At home, your apartment becomes a museum. Every room tells a story, and every story ends in the same unfinished sentence. You talk aloud sometimes. Not because you expect a reply, but because the silence has grown too heavy to carry alone. You say her name, you apologize, you explain, you cry. And sometimes you don't cry at all, just sit with your head bowed, palms open, waiting for something, anything, to come. You've considered therapy 100 times, but each time you imagine walking into a room and speaking her name, telling the truth you never told her to a stranger instead, it feels like a betrayal of a different kind. If anyone was supposed to hear it, it was her. And now she can't. So you keep it. Hold it close like something sacred and poisoned. You don't talk about her often. When people mention her, you smile, nod, maybe share a memory if it's safe. But your real memories, the raw ones, stay locked away. You've become a kind of private archivist, curating grief, shaping it, managing it. Not because you want to, but because it's the only thing you have left, and sometimes, just sometimes, you imagine what would have happened if you'd told her. If you'd taken her hand, looked her in the eyes, and let the truth fall out the way it had wanted to for years. Maybe she would have cried. Maybe she would have left. Maybe she would have never spoken to you again. Or maybe she would have pulled you close and whispered, "I knew. I just needed you to say it. You'll never know." And it's that, more than the lie itself, that keeps you awake some nights. Not what you said, but what you didn't. Because lies rot in silence. And silence, when left too long, becomes a coffin of its own. And now, the only one who could have opened that box with you is gone. Some days you forget for a little while. Not because you've healed. No, healing doesn't live here, but because the mind has its own way of protecting itself. You might be folding laundry, the sound of the washing machine humming in the background, when for just a moment, your thoughts drift somewhere else, something mundane. A to-do list, a song you used to like. And then, with no warning, no ceremony, it returns. Her name. Her face. That look she gave you once, the one where you knew she was giving you one last chance to speak and you didn't take it. It comes back not like a knife, not sharp, but slow, heavy. Like a weight you forgot you were carrying until you try to stand up straight and feel the strain in your back. You've begun to avoid mirrors. Not completely, not in a superstitious way, just enough to blur the clarity. You still catch glimpses, in windows and dark screens, but you rarely stare at yourself long enough to make eye contact. It's strange how a face can become unfamiliar over time, how it can reflect a version of you that no longer exists, or one you never fully knew. She used to tell you you looked tired when you were lying. She could see it in your eyes. You wonder if she saw it in the end and just didn't say anything. If she knew and chose silence too. You remember a specific day. It's been looping in your head for weeks now. It was raining, not heavily, just enough to drum gently on the roof. You were both sitting at her kitchen table. Warm tea between you. Something classical playing low from a nearby speaker. She asked you a question. Not directly, not forcefully, but it was the kind of question that begged for honesty. She wasn't even looking at you when she asked. Her gaze was on the steam rising from her cup. And you had the opening. The moment. The exact sliver of time you'd been waiting for. You could have told her then. You could have said, "There's something I never said." But you didn't. You nodded. Said something vague. Something neutral. And she moved on. But the moment stayed with you. You tell yourself now that it would have changed things. That the truth, though painful, would have brought you closer in the end. But you don't know that. And the not knowing has become its own kind of suffering. Because it forces you to replay the scene again and again, tweaking details, adjusting tone, trying to imagine how it could have ended differently if only you had opened your mouth. Your friendships have shifted since she died. You listen more, speak less. There's a caution in you now, a slowness to every word. You double check your tone, your intentions, even your stories. You're terrified of making the same mistake again, of letting something unsaid grow into something unrepairable. People notice. They say you're quieter now, gentler. Some call it maturity, but you know it's grief shaped into discipline. You've kept her messages, all of them, emails, notes, voice memos. There's a folder on your phone, one you open when the silence becomes too sharp. Her voice, still cheerful, still familiar, breaks through the present like sunlight in a closed room, and every time you hear it, there's a moment of illusion, a second where your mind forgets and you think, I should call her back. I should answer. And then it's gone. Like waking from a dream where you'd almost found your way home only to realize you're still lost. And that's what you are, mostly. Lost. Not in a dramatic, cinematic sense. Just untethered. You move through your days with enough function to fool most people. You work. You eat. You respond to messages. But inside, there's a hallway that never ends. A door you never opened. A voice you never answered. And no matter how much time passes, no matter how many new memories you try to build, the foundation always shifts under you, reminding you. It wasn't supposed to be this way. You lied to her, and now she's gone. And every day since, you've been trying to figure out how to live with that. Eventually, there comes a point when your body begins to hold the grief in ways you hadn't expected. Your shoulders slope more. Your breath shortens even when you're not moving. There's a tiredness that doesn't go away with sleep because it doesn't live in your muscles. It lives in the space just behind your ribs where memory becomes marrow. You start forgetting things, what day it is, where you left your keys, the name of that movie she loved. And then you remember too much. Whole scenes come back with a clarity so sharp it startles you. You hear her voice in your head not just when you're sad, but during quiet, uneventful moments. Opening a drawer, driving home, boiling water, as if she's braided into the background noise of your life. Always there. always waiting for the truth you never gave her. You've stopped explaining to people why you're distant. They ask if you're okay, and you smile, nod, tell them you're just tired, that life's been a lot lately. You say it the way people say the weather's been strange, easy, forgettable, something to move past. Because if you told the truth, the real truth, you don't think they'd know what to do with it. I lied to someone who loved me. I let them die without ever setting it right. It's too heavy. It doesn't fit in conversation. It barely fits inside you. Some nights, you sit on the floor of your room, not because it's more comfortable, but because it feels closer to something solid. You stare at the wall, hands limp between your knees, and you try to feel small enough that the pain won't see you. But it always does. It comes in quietly. It doesn't knock. It just settles behind your eyes and waits. And you let it. Because what else can you do? There's no apology you can send across the veil. No letter that will find her hands now. She is beyond all of it, and you're stuck with the echo of what you never said. You think about her laugh. It wasn't loud, but it was layered. It came from her chest, warm and real. You remember how she'd tilt her head when something caught her attention. How her voice softened when she talked to animals. How she remembered details about people most others overlooked. You wonder what she would say now if she could see you like this. Quiet, half ghosted. Drifting through your days like you're on pause. Would she be angry? Would she understand? Would she take your hand in hers and say, "Tell me now"? Or would she simply turn and walk away? Not because she hated you, but because there's nothing left to say. You write her name sometimes. On napkins, scraps of paper, corners of receipts. You don't even notice you're doing it until the letters are already formed. It's like your body still needs to reach for her in some small way, to say, "I remember. I still see you. I still owe you." But even the ink feels empty, because she will never see those pages. She will never hear the words. The moment passed, the door closed, and it didn't slam, it whispered shut, quiet enough that you almost missed it. And still, the question remains, carved deep and permanent. How do you forgive yourself when the one person who could forgive you is gone? You don't. Not really. You carry it. You learn to build your life around the hollow. You plant flowers beside the absence. You learn to speak softly, to listen more, to show up for people in ways you never did before. And maybe, in some small way, that's its own kind of penance. Not enough. Never enough. But something. You light a candle for her sometimes. You watch it flicker, the flame dancing in its glass shell, and you pretend for just a moment that she knows, that she sees, that somewhere beyond the noise and the silence, she forgives you. Not because you earned it, but because she never stopped seeing the good in people, even when they failed her. You begin to realize slowly and without drama that this is simply how life will be now. There's no cinematic redemption waiting for you at the end of a long hallway of guilt. No moment when the weight lifts all at once and you feel reborn. Healing, if it happens at all, is not something that announces itself. It arrives in fragments, quietly, without explanation, and not always in the ways you hoped. Sometimes it doesn't even feel like healing, it feels like adaptation. Like learning how to walk with a limp you'll carry forever. People continue to live around you. They laugh. They complain about minor things. They talk about the weather and weekend plans. You nod and smile, not because you're fine, but because the world doesn't stop for private sorrows. You learn to function. You become good at it, in fact. You answer emails, you show up to meetings, you even tell stories and make people laugh again. And all the while, that part of you, the one that didn't speak in time, sits quietly just behind your ribs, not demanding anything, just watching. Every now and then, someone asks you about her. Casual curiosity, often from someone who doesn't know the full story. "Weren't you too close?" they might ask. You'll pause. There's always a pause. Then you'll nod and say something like, "Yeah, She was important to me. And that's the truth. Maybe not the whole truth, but enough. Enough to hold you steady in that moment. But at night, when the performance ends and the audience leaves and you're alone again, the silence returns like a wave you've stopped trying to swim against. And there she is. In memory. In breath. In the sound of your own heartbeat slowing into sleep. You think about how many chances you had. How many times you could have taken a breath, looked her in the eye, and said, "There's something I need to tell you." You think about the years you spent convincing yourself that silence was love, that withholding was mercy, that some truths are better left buried. You know better now. Because silence isn't kindness. It's fear in disguise. And fear always rots the connection it pretends to protect. You think of how often she reached for you, not with questions but with presence. She gave you space, she gave you trust, she gave you every possible opportunity to be real. And you smiled, and nodded, and swallowed it down. So now you carry her not just in memory, but in consequence. She lives in your pauses, in your hesitations, in the way you hesitate now to let anyone else get too close. Because what if it happens again? What if you fail again? What if another person looks at you with those same open, trusting eyes, and you say nothing? Again. But the difference now is, maybe you won't. Because guilt changes you. Not in the way people think. Not as punishment, but as recognition. You see yourself more clearly now. Not as a monster, not as a victim. Just as someone who chose fear once, and lost something that could never be replaced. You've started writing, not for anyone, just pages and pages in a notebook no one else will read. You don't censor. You don't explain. You write her name at the top of every page like a prayer. And sometimes, just sometimes, when the ink flows steady and the words come fast, you feel her in the room with you, not accusing, not judging, just present, as if she's sitting across from you again waiting, listening, giving you space, just like she always did. And in those rare, impossible moments, you speak. Not because she can hear you, but because you still owe her the truth. You notice the way people's voices drift off when they mention her now. They glance at you mid-sentence like they're checking the weather inside you, unsure whether they're walking into storm or silence. Some friends stop bringing her up entirely out of some awkward respect, as though memory is a fragile glass you might drop if someone breathes too close. But they don't realize you think of her anyway. Not in anniversaries or birthday flashes, but in ordinary non-monumental moments. In the sound of wind on windows. In the pause before responding to a message. In the familiar sting of knowing there's still no reply waiting from her. Never again. Your relationships begin to change. Not just the new ones. Even the old ones. Especially the old ones. You start listening in ways you didn't before. Not just to what people say, but what they don't. You pick up on the way voices falter around things they're not ready to admit. You notice the spaces between words, the places where truth hides in hesitation. Because you know that shape now. You've worn it, lived inside it. And when someone close to you hesitates, you don't press them. But you make space. You open the door you never had the courage to walk through yourself. And you begin to speak differently too. Slower. With more weight behind every sentence. You no longer say things to fill space. There's a reverence in your speech now. A kind of gentleness born not of peace, but of regret. You don't lie anymore. Not even small ones. You can't. You flinch even at the suggestion. Because now every half-truth carries her shadow behind it. And you've already made one person carry the cost of your silence. You won't do it again. You catch yourself thinking about the younger version of you. The one who swallowed truth to keep the peace. The one who told themselves it wasn't the right time. You don't hate them. You understand them. But you don't forgive them either. That version of you was trying to protect something fragile, not realizing the silence was what would break it. And it did. The damage wasn't loud. It wasn't sudden. It was slow. Quiet. like a crack in the foundation you don't notice until the whole house leans wrong. She lives with you in quiet ways now. Her memory is not framed on the wall or set in stone. It lingers in how you say goodbye, in how you ask people how they are, and really mean it, in the way you check in on someone a second time, because you remember what it's like to say I'm fine when you're not. You carry her in the way you forgive more quickly, not because you're a better person, but because you know how short the window is before I'll tell them later becomes I never told them at all. There are nights when it feels like she's closer than ever. You lie awake, listening to the stillness, and it's not memory, it's presence, not grief, it's gravity, as if part of her stayed behind, not to haunt you, but to witness you, as if she's watching to see what you'll do with the rest of your life, now that you know better. You speak to her sometimes in those moments, softly, not asking for forgiveness anymore, just telling her things, the kind of small things you never said when she was alive. You describe the shape of the moon, the smell of rain on pavement, the sound of your neighbor's dog. You tell her when you're scared, when you're grateful, when you remember a joke she told you once and laughed again. It's not conversation. It's continuation. It's choosing presence over shame. And slowly, quietly, something changes. Not absolution, not erasure, but integration. The truth becomes part of your body, like a healed scar. Still visible, still tender, but no longer bleeding. You begin to understand that you will always carry the weight, but you can carry it and still move forward. You can carry it and still love, still laugh, still live. You'll never forget what you didn't say, but you can make sure you never miss the chance again. And maybe, just maybe, somewhere, in the deep quiet beyond language, she already knows, you begin to understand something quietly terrifying, not in a flash of clarity, but in a slow creeping realization that comes to you while doing the simplest things. Folding a towel, filling a glass, walking past the mirror and catching your own tired expression out of the corner of your eye. It is this. You have started to become the kind of person who builds their identity around what they couldn't fix, around what they didn't say, around who they lost. There's no bitterness in this, only a quiet awareness that who you are now, at your core, is no longer simply you, but you, and the echo of what you withheld, and the shape of the silence that followed her to the grave. That silence has taken up residence inside you, not loud, not painful, but settled. It does not argue. It does not accuse. It simply exists, a constant companion. Some days, it is heavier than others. Some days, it's like an old coat, one you've worn so long you barely feel its weight anymore. But then there are nights, long stretching nights when time bends and your thoughts circle back to the same moment over and over. Her eyes, asking something she never voiced, and your eyes, answering with the lie of nothingness. You remember the details you used to ignore, the pause before she said goodbye, the way she lingered after a joke, waiting for you to add something honest, the letters she gave you over the years, birthday cards, thank you notes, margins scribbled with thoughts too big to say aloud. You never wrote back. You always meant to. But meant to became your vocabulary for 1,000 quiet failures. And now that phrase sits in your chest like lead. You meant to tell her. You meant to make it right. You meant to speak. But silence has a way of deepening its roots the longer it's left untouched. Your dreams have changed. You no longer see her clearly. Her face is blurred, as if memory itself is retreating, choosing to protect her from your reconstruction. But you hear her voice, not speaking to you, just being, laughing in another room, singing something soft, asking a question you can't quite make out. And when you wake, there is a split second when you forget that she's gone, and that second is the cruelest thing your body can give you, because it always ends in that drop, an ache in the stomach, a sting behind the eyes, a whisper you can't take back. You think about what it means to live a life built on the foundation of a truth never spoken. It's not dramatic. It doesn't collapse in on itself like a broken bridge. It holds, but not with strength, with tension, with the kind of stillness that could shatter at the wrong question, the wrong memory, the wrong quiet afternoon. You think, this is what a fault line feels like. Not destruction, but the possibility of it, stretching endlessly beneath your feet. And yet, you move forward. Not because you're healed. Not because you've made peace. But because you must. The days come whether you want them to or not. The world keeps asking for your attention. Bills, birthdays, emails, traffic. And in the noise of it all, you learn to carry the silence differently. Not as a curse, but as a reminder. Of what not to repeat. Of what not to delay. Of what not to swallow. You learn to speak more quickly now. Not impulsively. Intentionally. When you love someone, you tell them. When you're sorry, you say it. When you're unsure, you admit it. And sometimes after you say the words, you look upward. Not out of superstition, but out of some quiet hope that she hears. That somewhere, beyond time, beyond explanation, she knows that the version of you who lied has become the version of you who cannot bear to do so again. She doesn't leave you, not truly. Her presence is in the way you remember birthdays now, how you listen to people, how you pause before answering anything that could one day become a regret. She is not just part of your past, she is a pattern now, woven into your instincts, your decisions, your discipline. You cannot bring her back, but you can carry her forward in the way you live, and in doing so, maybe, just maybe, you build something worthy of the silence you never dared to break. There is no end point to this kind of weight. It doesn't reach a peak and fade. It doesn't get wrapped in a bow and labeled healed. What happens instead is something harder to name. You begin to carry it like breath. Involuntary, constant. It becomes part of how you exist in rooms, how you hold conversations, how you look at photographs. You find yourself reacting to things she would have loved. A certain kind of sky. A joke tucked into a novel. The way wind moves over a field of tall grass. These things don't make you smile. Not immediately. They make you pause. It's in that pause she lives now. You go through her belongings less and less. Not because it hurts less, but because it hurts differently. What used to slice now sinks. The first time you opened her old drawer and smelled the faint trace of her perfume still clinging to something soft, your knees almost buckled. Now, when you open it, it's quieter inside you, but heavier, as if even the air has agreed to speak more gently when it comes to her. Your life continues in small, unheroic ways. There is no great transformation, no big decision that flips the story. You simply show up, day after day. You feed yourself, you answer texts even when they sit unread for days. You go outside and let the sun touch your skin even when the air feels wrong. And you do all of this not because it makes you feel better, but because you know she would have done the same. Because at some point, the only thing you can offer the dead is to keep moving in a way that honors their weight. You stop chasing forgiveness. That was the loudest part of your grief for so long. That desperate need to believe she would have forgiven you if only she'd known. But that hunger fades, not because you no longer care, but because you realize you cannot live inside a question forever. Forgiveness becomes a compass you aim yourself toward, not a destination you can reach. You live as if it were given, not because you earned it, but because you need to believe someone, somewhere, might still offer you grace even if you never get to hear the words. You find quiet rituals that keep her close. Lighting a candle at dusk. Carrying one of her coins in your coat pocket. Whispering her name in the morning before the world fully wakes. These rituals don't fix anything, but they make the weight less chaotic. They give it shape. And you've learned that grief, when left shapeless, spreads into every part of a person. You contain it now. Not perfectly, not always, but enough. Sometimes you speak of her in past tense with others, but in your heart, she never left the present. You think, she would be this age now. She would have had gray in her hair by now. She would have hated how I still can't make tea the way she did. These aren't thoughts that leave you in tears, they're threads. Lines of connection you're still tracing across the empty spaces. And maybe that's what love becomes when the person is gone. Not just memory, not just regret, but an invisible architecture. You don't build around the loss, you build through it. Letting it shape the rooms you walk through, the people you keep, the words you finally dare to say. She is no longer a part of your story. She is the silence that frames it. You find yourself becoming someone softer, though the world might never notice it. Not softer in weakness, but in sensitivity. A kind of internal gentleness born from long nights spent listening to silence scream through the spaces she once filled. You move differently now. You speak with intention. You feel things longer, linger in conversations a beat more than you used to, because somewhere inside, you is the memory of how quickly a moment can pass and never come back. The lie doesn't define you anymore, but it still informs you. It's become a part of your decision-making in ways you didn't expect. You no longer allow conflicts to sit unresolved for long. You reach out more often, even if the response is lukewarm or late. When someone hurts you, you tell them. When you hurt someone, you say you're sorry. Not just because it's right, but because you now understand the brutal cost of leaving things unsaid. You are not chasing perfection, you are chasing peace. And peace, you've learned, does not arrive in grand gestures, but in tiny mercies offered moment by moment. There are still hard days, certain smells, certain dates, dreams that come without warning and shake you loose from sleep. But those moments are quieter now. The grief is not smaller. It has just learned to sit beside you without demanding all your air. And sometimes, when you're alone, you speak to her like she's in the next room. Not loudly, not theatrically, just casually, like you used to. I tried the lemon cake again. Still not right. Or, you would have liked this podcast. These aren't attempts at connection, they're acknowledgments. She was here. She mattered. She shaped the way you love. And even in her absence, she shapes the way you live. And maybe, most profoundly, she changed the way you forgive. Not others. Yourself. For years, the guilt was so thick you couldn't breathe beneath it. It paralyzed you. But now, you've begun to loosen your grip around it. Not to forget. Not to erase. But to live anyway. To take another step, to open your heart again, to risk truth. To tell someone else the thing they need to hear before it's too late. You often wonder who you might have become had you never lied to her. Had you told her the truth? Had she lived long enough to respond? Would the pain have been less? Would your friendship have survived it? But these are not questions that yield comfort. They spiral. So you let them float above you like distant stars. Things to notice, not chase. They shine a little light. That is enough. And then there are the small, surprising moments when something beautiful happens and your first instinct is still to tell her. You turn your head, a comment rising on your tongue, and then you remember. And in that space of remembrance, you smile. Not because it doesn't hurt, but because it does. And because that hurt is proof of love, of time, of truth eventually spoken, even if it came too late. You are not whole. You never will be, but you are no longer hollow. You are filled with echoes, yes, but also with intention, with courage, with a quiet vow that no one else in your life will leave this world wondering how you really felt. And that vow, offered not with fireworks, but with small daily effort, is your offering to her, your apology, your redemption, your love still unfolding. And now, as the last light of the day leans low against the walls and the world begins to exhale into night, something in you softens. Not in defeat, in surrender. Not to the grief, but to the knowing that you've done what you could with what was left. That though the truth arrived late, it still lives and grows and shapes the air around you. You sit in the stillness, listening to the quiet the way you used to listen to her voice, attentively, gratefully, knowing that silence can carry its own kind of language when you let it. There's no longer a need to fill every empty space with apologies. She lives in the shape of the life you're building now. One where love is spoken, one where truths are not buried, one where small kindnesses are the bricks you use to rebuild. There are no answers that will ever feel like enough. No perfect reckoning. No moment of transformation so clean that it erases what came before. But that's not what healing is. Healing is staying, even when it hurts, even when it would be easier to run or numb or forget. Healing is choosing to wake up every day and try again, to live in such a way that the next person you love never has to wonder where they stand in your heart. So you light one more candle. You whisper her name, not out of habit, but as ceremony. You are not asking her for forgiveness tonight. You are simply including her, inviting her into the quiet, into the breath, into the life you are still, slowly, tenderly learning how to live. And perhaps in some place the heart can feel, but the mind can't reach. She hears you. Not the words you speak now, but the ones you never could. And maybe, just maybe, she smiles. Sleep now. You've done enough for today. Let the weight rest on the floor. Let the ache loosen its grip. The night is wide and full of mercy. There is nothing more to fix, only to feel, only to dream. And maybe tonight, as you drift, you will meet her again. Not in apology, not in sorrow, but in that soft golden space where nothing needs to be said at all. Good night. Sleep deeply. And may your dreams carry you someplace where love arrives in time. Good night.